Well, good morning, everybody. Looks like we have a full house today, and welcome to the TAC meeting this morning on this great Monday morning. Great weather out there today, so it's good to see everybody inside at this meeting anyway. So first up, we have the approval of the TAC agenda for July 22nd. I get a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve today's agenda. Any discussion? But question, please. I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed. All right. Next, we have the approval of the TAC meeting minutes from June 24th, 2024. Hopefully, everybody has had a chance to review the minutes. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from June 24th. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed. All right, next director's report, Chad.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the Technical Advisory Committee. We have a nice agenda today, 3 action items, 3 discussion and update items. So we'll begin with a few reports that the staff has to report to you, beginning with Dora on a couple of items like MTP and then bike counts, pit bike counts. Dora, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dora Gallo, Transportation Planner here at WAMPO. So just a little update on our long-range transportation plan. WAMPO's currently updating the plan and looking into the year 2050. As we're getting closer to the deadline, we are going to start uploading drafts of our chapters. So you can see that on our website. We'll start adding you'll notice that some of the chapters will have like spaces where we still need to update some data or we're waiting on graphics and stuff like that. But for the most part, most of the chapters will have the data that is needed. Any questions?
Next item, Dora.
So I'll be going over the annual bicycle and pedestrian count. So it's that time of the year again where we want to start recruiting some volunteers. This year we'll have 35 different sites all across the WAMPO region. If you look at page 8, you can see the flyer in your agenda packets, and you'll see that our dates for this year are Wednesday, September 11th from 10 to noon or 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Thursday, September 12th is the same times, and then Saturday, September 14th from noon to 2. And you can register to volunteer on our website on our bicycle and pedestrian tab. And there's a form there, and then we added a section at the bottom if you want to request a location to count. If you're comfortable with that location or if you counted it in the past or it's closer to your home or work, you can definitely add that in the comment box, and we'll try to accommodate people's requests. Any questions, comments?
Do you have any shareable graphics for social media for that?
Yeah, we have some social media posts that we'll be sharing, and then we can definitely send them out through email as well.
I do have one question. I know we've been looking at the automated pedestrian and bicycle counters.
Mm-hmm.
Will those be part of this, or will they not be available to deploy by then?
We won't have them for the counts. We're hoping to get them towards the end of the year. They'll definitely will not be here by the time of the count, so we're not planning to have them by then. But once we receive them, then we can start placing them throughout the different locations, and then we'll start getting that data.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dora.
Thank you.
We have a couple more items by Marky Jonas on public engagement and cashless tolling. Marky.
Good morning, Marky Jonas, Administrative and Public Outreach Coordinator. So just a couple of really quick updates from me. The first is that we did just finish our third round of public engagement for Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050. That ran from May 20 through June 30. We attended different community events, and we also had that survey online. 474 surveys were received, and those results are being analyzed and will be incorporated into MTP 2050. I'll also give a results report once I have more data to present for those. And then I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who participated and helped spread the word about that. Any questions? Okay. And then I just have a quick video to show. So the Kansas Turnpike Authority became fully cashless starting on July 1st. So here's just a quick video to kind of explain how that all works.
KTA is converting to a cashless toll system in July 2024. Let's look at how that will change how KTA charges for tolls. Currently, customers are tolled for travel based on two pieces of data, an entry location and an exit location. The system connects these to make a single trip. However, if one of these pieces of data is missing, operational issues are created for both KTA and customers. Additional challenges with this entry-exit system include time limits, same entry, same exit, and the use of electronic lanes without a transponder. Cashless tolling is the solution. It keeps customers moving, removes operational challenges, and violations become a thing of the past. With this new system, drivers enter and exit the turnpike just like any other interstate. Instead of calculating tolls by connecting an entry and exit location, the system adds individual transactions as customers drive through toll zones. What used to display as a single trip on a statement will now be shown as several smaller individual transactions. More transactions do not necessarily mean a higher toll for the same travel. In anticipation of cashless tolling, KTA's board established a new toll rate structure that keeps the Kansas Turnpike's tolls at the bottom of toll rates across the country. The new toll structure will provide a flat per mile rate based on axle count and how the vehicle is identified, either a transponder or the vehicle registration information. This translates into consistent fares for all customers. Cashless tolling will be a win-win for KTA and customers. To learn more, visit driveks.com.
So there's that video. Like it mentioned, you can learn more at driveks.com. And then I also was going to mention that I heard that they are doing some pop-ups around the area, so you can go and pick up a K-tag for those who do not have one or would like one. And I can include some more information on those in the minutes as well. Any questions, comments? Okay, thank you.
So, Margie, next. Request for proposals. We have like 6 of those, and some of them are new initiatives, some are routine. So we request Peter to present. Thank you, Peter.
Good morning, TAC members. Peter Moore here at WAMPO. Give you an update on all of these RFPs that should be turning into contracts here very soon. So we have our intelligent transportation systems architecture. We are hiring a consultant to assist in development of an updated ITS regional architecture and to complete a comprehensive assessment and inventory of the current architecture. In that process, we have received proposals. That's all closed, and we have chosen a consultant. Just this morning, I got a signed contract back for them that should be a consent item at our next TPP meeting. Travel demand model update phase 2. We're trying to secure expert technical support from a consultant to keep the model up to date, train WAMPO staff, and provide on-call technical assistance. For this contract, we have also gotten a signed contract from our consultant that will also be another consent item at the upcoming TPP meeting. Safe routes to school planning assistance. So we're seeking a consultant to assist in development of SRTS plans for all the schools and school districts for the region. Our proposal deadline was June 28th. The consultant selection committee has been formed and the proposals are now under review. Safe Streets and Roads for All invitation grant. We have set aside funding to secure a consultant to help us with an RFP to help develop a grant application for the 2025 round funding. Automatic bicycle pedestrian counters. So earlier this spring, we issued a request for proposals for the procurement of automatic bicycle pedestrian counters. After careful review of the proposals and detailed evaluations and discussions regarding the product functionality and procurement costs, we have chosen a vendor. We have a draft contract that has been reviewed by the consultants. I just had their changes reviewed by our legal advisor and hopefully get that contract back to them and ideally have that as a consent item at our next TPP. And then finally, our financial and single audit services RFP. So An RFP for a consultant to assist WAMPO with the completion of its annual single audit was issued this past spring. One consultant submitted a proposal. It was determined that the proposal met the requirements set forth in our RFP, and subsequently a contract has been developed between WAMPO and this consultant, and it will be presented for approval as a consent agenda item during TPP's next meeting on August 13th. So ideally, we'll have at least 3 consent items for contracts, hoping it'll be 4 with that automatic pedestrian counter contract. Any questions for me on the RFPs?
On the bike ped counter, is that a permanent installation or do you only roll it out when it's time to count each year?
They are mobile, so we can deploy them in different locations. But I am quite curious on how this kind of pilot on these counters will go. But we should be able to move them to different locations. Unfortunately, we didn't quite meet the deadline on getting them for the counters for our annual bike ped count for this year, because we were hoping to do some validation with that. But yeah, they're mobile, to answer your question. Kind of rambled there a little bit.
Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate it. Mr. Chair, thanks.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Dora, Mark, and Peter and Chad. A lot of great updates. So our next item is public comments. So this is the forum for public to provide comments about any item on the agenda or off the agenda. Would any member of the public like to make a comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our action items. So we have 3 action items. The first one is the fiscal year 25 through 28 Transportation Improvement Program. Peter?
Hey, so as you may already be well aware, we are adopting an updated TIP. So we'll start from the beginning here. So what is the TIP? Identifies projects we implemented in the WAMPO region for federal fiscal years 2025 through 2028. All regionally significant and or federally funded transportation projects must be in the TIP before they can proceed and need to be consistent with our long-range Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It programs projects with WAMPO suballocated federal funding and about $12 to $15 million per year in non-suballocated federal funding. The FFY 2025 to federal fiscal year 2028 TIP that we're looking here to vote on today includes 130 individual projects and programs valued at just over $1.1 billion. Here's our timeline. You can see we're gone through the call for projects, our workshop, staff review, selection committee, TAC recommendations on the selection committee recommendations, TPP approval of the projects, our state and federal review, finish our public comment period. And so we are here at the end of the summer at our, where we offer this for TAC and TPP approval. In the TIP, we of course have our list of projects, quite extensive. You can see the map here. This is available in your packet, but also available online on our website. The chart here you can see contains the WAMPO suballocated funding recommendations that were approved in by TPP this past June. Again, all of this is also available online as well. And then we have, of course, have all of the federal fiscal year 2025 to 2028 suballocated projects. Map here as well. And then in addition, the TIP also looks at federal performance measures and how each project may affect our different performance measures related to safety, road condition, reliability. And this is again, all available online in detail in the draft TIP document. We also ensure that it's federally or fiscally constrained to make sure that the projects that we program in the TIP can reasonably be funded with anticipated revenues. And there's also graphics. You can see how it's broken down by different project type. I understand there's a lot to take in. We try to put it in the packet there, but this again is also available online for review as well. I In addition, we also perform an environmental justice analysis in the tip. Importantly, from what we determined from where the projects are and where there may be are different environmental justice zones that look at minority populations and low income areas within the WAMPO region. From our analysis, we found that the fiscally constrained transportation investments included in this tip do not disproportionately burden or deny benefits to environmental justice or EJ communities. This is the low income map. Previous one here is the minority populations. And during our public comment period, we did not receive any public comments on the new FFY 2025 to 2028 tip. And then before I go to the next slide here, because I went through those pretty fast, any questions for me?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, so that brings us to our action items. The committee can choose to recommend the TPP approve the FFY 2025 to FFY 2028 as presented. Recommend the TPP not approve the new tip, or recommend the TPP approve the tip with specific changes. Our recommendation is we recommend the TPP approve the new tip as presented.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to present, to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to recommend the TPP approve the FY 25 and 20 through 28 tip as presented. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Next item is item B, the FFY 2025 through 28 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 1.
Okay, so now that we've adopted this new tip, we are now applying a new, or putting forth an amendment for your consideration to this new tip. So after the start of the public comment period for the FFY 2025 to 2020 tip, we learned of several time-sensitive project additions and modifications that will need to be made in the tip in this federal fiscal year. This also includes the programming of Federal Highway Administration Federal Fiscal Year 2024 August redistribution funds to qualifying projects as determined in coordination with KDOT and the WAMPO Project Selection Committee. Before you, you have the table of the different projects that were eligible to receive this funding. We worked closely and extensively with KDOT to ensure that we had a good set of projects that could both qualify for this funding and then also complete the necessary administrative steps, this amendment being one of those, to ensure that the projects could receive this funding. And before I move on past this, any questions on the August redistribution funding?
I just appreciate WAMPO staff for getting this together and you know, kind of knowing ahead of time just to pre-plan for this. So I appreciate that because I know that's on a short time frame.
Oh, thank you, Chair. We appreciate that. So the August redistribution project. So the additional funding changes will be enacted through the following amendment and administrative adjustments. So to get in 2 of the projects, we'll make an administrative adjustment to the current tip to ensure that it's reflected by a tight July 30 deadline and the current tip. But this next tip won't be officially adopted until August 13th. So we had a slight gap. So we have an administrative adjustment on both tips that we'll be putting forth today that have the same information. They're just being done to the 2 different tips. The Amendment 1 will include extra funding for the West Street I-235 MacArthur, and the administrative adjustments will add the funding updates for the Delano Transit Center and the multimodal facility. Okay, So the rest of this will just look like one of our regular tip amendments. So you can check out the full details in the amendment summary shown that is on your screen or as an attachment linked in your packet and a link at the bottom of the webpage and we're all shown. 4 projects in amendment 1 have requested changes that require TAC TPP approval. 2 requests for new projects to be added to the TIP, 1 request for a project removed from the TIP, and 1 for a project to be modified in the TIP. So similar, the amendment 1, the public comment period started on the 19th and will go through August 2nd. We're here today for TAC recommendation, and then on 8/13 TPP it'll be submitted to TPP for a formal vote. See here are different projects listed here. The ones that will require formal amendment, we have the West Street I-235 MacArthur project, and we're changing an AC conversion of STBG to direct STBG funding, and a slight increase in project costs that'll be paid with MPO, STBG, and local funds. The Which Way video wall, we're taking that project. It is going to be essentially, it's in this table, it's being removed, but it's going to be combined with the intelligent transportation improvements in Wichita project with the exact same amount of funding. So no overall funding changes there. And then we had one more KDOT project, the EV charging station at Exploration Place. That is related to KDOT's community EV chargers program. Our sub-allocated changes are listed here before you. Of course, you have the West Street I-235, the Intelligent Transportation System Project, the Which Way video wall taken off, and the Wichita Intelligent Transportation System Project. No funding change on there, but converting some CMAQ funds to STBG. And then our local, state, and federal funding changes. This is also available in the packet, and you can also see the multimodal facility and Delano Transit Center, those other 2 August redistribution projects in this table as well. So we have our public comment and review period that we're currently in now. It's consistent with the current Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It's fiscally constrained and adds about $3.45 million in impact and a financial impact. Which finally brings us to our action options. Any questions for me on this amendment?
Seeing none, go ahead.
So before we have our action options, we can recommend the TPP approve the federal fiscal year 2025-2028 TIP Amendment 1 as presented. Recommend the TPP not approve the new TIP Amendment 1. Or recommend the TPP approve the new TIP Amendment 1 with specific changes. We recommend the TPP approve the federal fiscal year 2025-2028 TIP Amendment 1 as presented.
Anybody like to make a motion to approve the TIP Amendment number 1 as presented?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to recommend that TPP approve the FFY 25 through 28 TIP Amendment number 1 as presented. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you, Peter. All right, next we have item C is population projection. Jonathan Norris from CDBR and Peter. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Jonathan Norris. I'm a research economist for Wichita State University's Center for Economic Development and Business Research. A lot of you have heard me speak before on these population projections, but we're going to today review the changes since the previous meeting and then answer any questions that anybody has before we move for formal recommendations. So the broader context on this is that for a component of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050, an important element of that is understanding the dynamics of how the population is going to grow or change through 2050, right? So this has been an ongoing process. Previously, there was a population projection that was developed late last year. That fell short of some of the targets, and there were some current concerns about the methodology, which that was an allocation method. We started with this high-level estimate that ZDPR produced for the county levels and allocated that down to cities. The issue with that is that it really didn't capture some of the unique elements of growth for each of the communities. And so we had a rethink several months back and changed it to actually use the same or a variant of the same methodology that we use for doing our actual county level projections, which is an age cohort survival model. It actually takes the existing population, ages them up over time, and it's subject to fertility, mortality. And then in here, we wanted to push this migration calculation that we like previously were doing at the county level out to the communities, right? We also decided at that point that there needed to be an overall regional constraint because there is in an area that is as interconnected as the Wichita Metro, beyond a certain point, you'll have exhausted people moving into the area from external, and you start, the communities might start trying to grow in lieu of growth in other communities, in essence. And so the way that we got at that actual migration estimate is threefold. Number one, we looked at historical migration, which is that community net migration trend. We looked at a long-range employment forecast through 2050 for each of the communities, which that was developed by CEDBR as well. And then the most recent element of it, which you've probably heard me talk a lot about, is gathering building permits data. So communities have been investing differently in housing, which it matters to the long-term growth of communities, what sort of investments they're making in their housing and apartments, because it gives people opportunities to move in there in excess. So we wanted to also give the factor of which of the communities in the region are making major investments in their housing stock and apartments. So the current figures as they stand, we are seeing the population growing through 2050 in almost all of the communities in the region. Major growth in some of the larger communities. It's pretty much in line with what the most recent figures were. Really, the only change since the last time this crowd has seen it is Andover is a little bit higher because we worked with them recently. It leaves us with an overall growth rate for the WAMPO region of 21.7% cumulative by 2050. That's 0.72% annualized growth, which is significantly more when looking at that building permits data included as opposed to not included. Without building permits, it was about 0.5% growth annualized. The table on the left, which I believe that is also in your packet, it may not be, but the table on the left is the annualized growth for each community. And the bar chart with the green border around it is the cumulative growth by 2050. These estimates align a lot more closely with some of the city level expectations for their own growth. Like one of the major reasons behind developing this methodology is that there were already many existing forecasts at the city level, but we wanted to make sure that every city was having a forecast that was produced using the same methodology, so there wasn't any kind of incongruity there. Currently, we are here for formal recommendation for TPB. And I think there is only one community in the area that did not respond for building permits. And so that gives us a very high degree of confidence that the building permits data is representative. Are there any questions for me at this point? I know I went through this very quickly, so happy to answer questions.
Not seeing any.
Very good. And so, Peter.
And that brings us to our action items. We can recommend the TPB approve the population projections as presented, not approve the population projections, or recommend the TPB approve the population projections with specific changes. Our staff recommendation again is recommend the TPB approve the population projections as presented.
Well, thank you. Anybody like to make a motion to recommend that TPB approve the population projections as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. to recommend the TPB approve the population projections as presented. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. I know we've seen this, several times throughout the last several months. So definitely appreciate all the work that went into it and all the adjustments from the recommendations from both the TAC and TPP.
Thank you, Chair. We really appreciate that.
Next, we have item 5, discussions and updates, the 2025 UPWP planning. Chad?
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, members of the Technical Advisory Committee. As you know, Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP, is a yearly document. We document what are the programs we are planning ahead of the next year, 2025. So this is the time we start in the month of July, coordinating with KDOT and Federal Highway Administration and local entities on what type of projects would you like to see in the future, in the next year. Did we include everything we intend to? And this is where we are so far. So that's an overview, and Marky is going to dive more deeper into details. Marky, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So first to start, I was just going to give an overview. WAMPO has 5 main core planning documents, which always need to be maintained. So we wanted to present the status of each of them. As we've discussed many times, our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, that is due for an update this next June. And then the Transportation Improvement Program is in the process of being approved and is expected to be approved next month by the TPP. And then our Unified Planning Work Program, we do annually. And then the congestion management process, that was approved back in May, and that will be incorporated into the long-range Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And then the public participation plan is not due for an update until 2027. And then just to, as Chad said, we developed this with some planning partner staff to discuss some potential planning activities for 2025 based on the work done in 2024 and the plan update cycles. So listed in the packet and in this table here, we have some of our potential high-level planning priorities that will be incorporated into our Unified Planning Work Program for 2025. So I'll just quickly mention a few of these. So the first one we have on here is different safety initiatives and activities, and that includes our Safe Streets and Roads for All grant tasks. And then we have our travel demand model and congestion management process. And then we have continued and ongoing economic development study work. And then the regional active transportation plan, which will be kicking up a bit more probably towards the end of this year in coordination with the Wichita Bike Master Plan. Then we have our intelligent transportation systems architecture. That is one of the ones that is, the contract is under development. And then we have our safe routes to school planning assistance. That is also an ongoing, but expected to ramp up a bit more in 2025 as well. And then ongoing MTP 2050 work, our ongoing bike ped counts, and that includes potentially buying more equipment for those automatic counters in 2025. And then we have just the administration of our transportation improvement program, and that has regularly scheduled amendments every quarter. And then a few more, we have the regional transit implementation plan. This is on that list just in case it is not wrapped up this year, but is anticipated to be completed within the next few months. And then ongoing accounting services, including our yearly audit. And then the Title VI in Limited English Proficiency or LEP plan, both of those are due for an update next July. And then household travel surveys is kind of a big one. Lots of work will go into that one. And I'm sure we will talk a lot more about this in the future, but it is collecting data of travel patterns in the region. And then the transportation pooled funds, it's a super cool program that we're looking into more, where different entities can kind of be contributing to a larger study. And then the rest of these ones up here are ones that are not specifically for WAMPO, but that we are either helping with or that are important for the region. And so that's why those are listed or will likely be listed in our UPWP. Any questions on these?
No, not seeing any.
All right. And then just some next steps on this. We'll also be going over these at TPB, and then we'll have the state and federal review, then a public comment period. And then we will be back to the TAC seeking a recommendation on the 2025 UPWP in October. Thank you.
Thank you, Marky. Very good job in detailing step by step. Just for information, UPWP Unified Planning Work Program document is a federally required document that all MPOs need to develop each year. And then once you approve, this will ensure the funding from federal administration committed with these activities and, so on. Your approval is, very critical so that TPB approves and this goes to KDOT and UPWP for further concurrence. Just an FYI that one of those federally required documents that MPOs need to develop besides the TIP and MTP, the usual ones. With that, thanks so much.
And then please let us know if there are things once you don't have to be this moment, but if there are things that you see that you think should be included or that don't make sense to be included, please let us know. That is part of this presentation is we want to get feedback. We want to make sure that everything that is important to all of our stakeholders is reflected in the UPWP. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marky. All right, next we have a regional transit implementation plan update. Bill?
Good morning. Marky, if you'll advance slides for me, I'd appreciate that. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. The things that I have a relatively brief update for folks today. And the things that I want to just update are kind of where we're at in the entire process. Could we go to the next slide, please? And that about looking at each of the various alternatives and our requests to each of the jurisdictions for some additional input. I want to just touch a little bit on ultimately what is anticipated as part of the next step is looking at coordinating services or developing some partnerships between jurisdictions. And then ultimately, I think one of the things that we want to make sure that we're talking about as part of this study is as we develop these partnerships, how might or what might be those options for governing or managing the service that could come out of the implementation process that we're putting together. If we go to the next slide, I'll just go to the next one then. So, I've used this one before, but I just want to use it again to introduce that we have a broad range of potential service ideas that we have evaluated, that we put together the documentation for, and that where we're at right now is that we have sent to each of the jurisdictions a packet of information that includes a description of each of the alternatives that we are looking at, and a little included in that information are some ideas so if one of the alternatives could be some regional service, that we've included in there is a fixed route regional service, that we've included a description of what that service could look like. We've included a cost estimate of what that could look like. And we've also included some information in there as to who we would see as the local funding partner. And then that's just one of the various alternatives. But again, we've got a list of probably 15 various alternatives, sub-alternatives that we are looking for local input on relative to whether or not this is an idea that the local jurisdictions think is appropriate for their community. And if appropriate, would you be interested in continuing to evaluate it as either a provider or potentially as a partner? If we could go to the next slide, please. So what we've also done is sent out, as I said, is to each of the jurisdictions information on each of the alternatives. And what we're asking people to do with this information is to review each of the alternatives, but review it from the perspective of your community. That there are going to be some alternatives that are included within the packet, particularly those that may be some more of the regional fixed route service. And the example that we're showing here is a concept that would connect from the downtown transit center in Wichita down to Derby and alternate intermediate potential stops along that. So that this information was also sent to all of the other jurisdictions, so that if you're Clearwater in one of the jurisdictions that received the information, this particular alternative may not be applicable to you. So we're asking each of the jurisdictions to look at the range of alternatives, let us know whether or not that idea could be applicable, whether or not you have interest in continuing to look at it, or if it's a concept that, okay, we looked at, but it just doesn't have legs for our particular community. And how are we doing that? If you go to the next slide, please, is that we have put together using SurveyMonkey, a relatively brief questionnaire. This questionnaire, again, has been emailed to each of the jurisdictions, and within the questionnaire, we're essentially asking you if you have interest in continuing the or does the concept, is it applicable for your particular community? And then also we're asking that get to gather input from your community's perspective on whether or not we should dismiss it from continued evaluation relative to your community. Should we retain it and you're interested in being an operator, or should we retain it and you're interested in being a partner, but not the operator of that particular service? So to date, and we had sent this out a few weeks ago, and we had requested responses by July 10th. The last policy body meeting was July 9th, and at that meeting, we're let people know that if you needed a little bit more time, we would rather take a little bit more time to get your input, as opposed to saying, well, you know, everything is due by the end of the 10th. So what I would ask of the people at the meeting today, because I would assume folks in this room would be involved in the conversation at the community or at the jurisdiction level relative to each of these alternatives, that if you have not had that conversation with other decision makers in your community, if you could bring it up to them and ask them, are they going to be getting together to have the conversation? And then also reiterate to them, because we did include it in the information that we had sent out, is we're here to help. That I am very interested, if you're getting together as a jurisdiction, to participate with you. Right now, I think I would prefer that be remote, and I think we can do it remotely. But if you're looking for help, we're here to help you walk through the various alternatives relative to a specific jurisdiction, and just have that conversation. And again, that if you could reach out to decision makers to see where they're at on that process, we would appreciate it. That to date, I have received responses from 8 different jurisdictions, so that there is still, you know, I think a pretty decent number out there that we would like to receive information from. Okay, next slide. So, and with the information that we received, that what we're going to be looking at and trying to understand, are there natural community partners? Are there communities that are within relative proximity of each other that are in support of a similar alternative? And if there are, what we would want to do is put together different partnerships to provide that particular service. I think one of the examples that I had used in our stakeholders meeting a couple weeks back was when you're looking at those suburban communities just on the north, that would include Valley Center, Park City, Bel Air, that could, if there is consistent support in those northern communities, just north of Wichita, in additional service, could we kind of create a northern suburban service concept that each of those communities could then share in some of that cost. But then also, are there other natural partners that we can put together around the region to help provide the various ranges of service that there may be out there? And one of the alternatives could also be, depending on kind of how we see different communities coming together, is Sedgwick County Transportation a potential additional provider that if we could find additional funding for that service, could they then be kind of that umbrella for the entire region? Next slide. And so that leads us to then, as we're looking at these potential partnerships, is we want to make sure that everybody understands kind of how we could put together a governance structure or a management structure for that service. Next slide, please. And we had used this in previous presentations, is that operating service could be within the region, could be anywhere from a range of independent operators all the way over to the other end of the spectrum of, hey, is there one agency within the entire region that could provide the range of services that we come up with as recommendations, proposals from the work that we're doing here. So that this is kind of that last portion of the work of this study that we need to get into, explain to folks, is that we have a pretty good toolbox or range of alternatives that we could look at as we put together these partnerships moving forward to provide additional transit service within the entire WAMPO region. But we need to make sure we understand the rules that there are available to us within each of these different opportunities. So if we go to the next slide. And why, I think, do we want to make sure that we explain that it's important to be looking at potential partnerships. That in earlier presentations, we showed a graphic that identified each of the various ideas or elements or things that each of the agencies would be doing on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly or an annual basis. But in that, what we wanted to show with this graphic is that, hey, the various elements that we have of the services out there all cost money. But when you're looking at the range of elements that we need to invest in transit service, that about 2/3, I know I've got 3/4 of it here is all labor, but in reality, when you look at these, I applied some planner math and I made a mistake, but about 2/3 of all of the costs of providing transit service for any of those providers is going to really fall into that category of labor. And if we can look at alternatives and find alternatives of partnerships that help us share in that labor cost, we can spread some more of those costs of providing service amongst different participants, different communities, different agencies within the area. And that we want to make sure that we're being as efficient as we can in providing that service. And next slide, please. So in that, one of the things I think as we're looking at these potentials for partnerships, we're also investigating, evaluating the idea of an authority as that one potential entity for providing service. And that one of the things that we are looking at is the rules of the game as they are laid out in Kansas. There is one transit authority, at least that I've been able to find in the state of Kansas, in Topeka. And so that there are guidelines, there are there is state legislation associated with an authority. And we have to play within the rules of those guidelines established at the state. And that at this point in time, what I'm seeing is that if there was the idea of an authority, it would need to be at a city level. And also that may need to be at a metropolitan class city, So that one of the things that we are presently investigating is, well, does that say that if we were to create an authority that would cover the entire area, that it would have to be Wichita, or would we need to go back to the legislature to change the legislation to allow another jurisdiction that may even be Sedgwick County, or WAMPO to be the manager or the home location of that authority? Those are the things that we're evaluating now so that we have a good understanding as we continue to talk about, again, how are we going to go about governing an entity that comes out of this work, in that what are the opportunities available to us? What are the opportunities that are not available to us? And one of those might very well be an authority. Okay, next slide. So what are we doing as we're finalizing the plan? That again, we're right now gathering input from each of the jurisdictions as to which of the alternatives from their perspective are things that they want to continue to look at, and how deep do they want to get into the provider. We're looking at the operating concepts. What are those opportunities to put various communities together in a partnership? And then ultimately, how does that partnership look? And we're in the process now of also putting together the various chapters of our final document and getting ready for our final series of public meetings that we're probably looking at September-ish, I would think, based on the idea that we're still gathering input as to which of the jurisdictions have are supporting various alternatives that we're looking at. That I think is my update. Are there any questions that people have?
Are there any questions for Bill? I'm not seeing any, so I do appreciate your presentation, Bill, and your update.
Thank you very much.
All right, next we have item C, the Wichita Transit Network Plan Update. Raven.
And actually, I'm going to let James and Sam from Nelson Nygaard take this. I can't do any justice to all the work that they have been doing over the past few months.
Thank you, Raven. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is James Gomez. I'm with Nelson Nygaard. I'm the project manager for the Wichita Transit Network Plan. I'm joined by my colleague, Sam Wright. We have a brief presentation. This is our first update to the TAC, and this project got kicked off back in the fall of last year. It's been concurrent with the Regional Transit Implementation Plan, and we've been coordinating with Bill and his team on that effort. The Wichita Transit Network Plan is focused on transit service within city limits. Can you advance to the next slide, please? Here's a look at the overall timeline. So again, we got kicked off back in the fall. We had interviews with some bus operators. We did some extensive field work and coordinated with staff to refine the goals of the project. And the first phase of the study was looking at analyzing and understanding existing conditions. That included taking a deep dive into ridership patterns over the past several years, as well as looking at demographic, socioeconomic, and growth patterns for the city of Wichita. That culminated in a state of the system report that described all of those existing as well as anticipated future conditions. We also conducted a very extensive rider survey, which I'll talk about in a little more detail in a moment. And then we also had a series of stakeholder meetings and stakeholder workshops. The second phase of this study focused on developing service concepts, which we developed in collaboration with staff. And we're now at the phase where we've just taken that out to the community, and we've received a lot of feedback from not only riders, but also just general members of the community. And we're now looking into the future and developing some different growth scenarios. Next slide, please. All right, so the two graphics on this slide show both ridership historically on the left, as well as ridership distribution across the city as of this past fall. As we look at the left side of the screen, you can see that ridership back in 2019 is at a similar level to where it's at today. Every transit system in the country saw a huge decline during the pandemic, but Wichita has recovered really well and steadily over the past 4 years to now get back up to 2019 levels. In fact, Saturday service has fully recovered. Weekday is just a step below the 2019 levels. That's about 4,000 boardings per day. Over the course of every year, there's ebbs and flows with ridership, but generally we're at the same level as 2019. On the right side of the screen, this is a heat map that shows how ridership is distributed across the city, and the darker colors indicate where there's higher ridership. Some of those locations include downtown, with not only the downtown transit center, but other destinations throughout downtown, as well as Delano. And then another major hotspot is going to be Wichita State University, as well as the 21st Street corridor. A lot of students living in close proximity to the university take different routes to get to campus, primarily Route 21. And then on the Harry Street corridor, that's another strong corridor, as well as Broadway, both south and north. There's also several different destinations across the city which generate high ridership, and those include medical facilities, as well as Walmart supercenters and Dillon supermarkets. And many of those are identified on the screen as well. Next slide, please. All right, the first phase of the study not only looked at Wichita, but we also compared the city with several other peer communities. We came up with this list of different peer cities by looking first at population, density, development patterns, as well as cities that are just in the general same part of the country. We compare things such as what level of service they operate, how much funding they contribute for transit, and then also just their ridership patterns and their fare policies. On the left side of the screen, we show the operating funding per capita for each one of the communities, and you can see that Wichita is at the lowest end of this list of peer cities. And on the right side of the screen, we show a couple of basic levels of service availability, that being hours of operation across the day. And Wichita has the shortest service span, both on weekdays and Saturdays, and does not currently provide Sunday service. Some of the cities on this list do provide Sunday service, as shown on the right side of the column. And these are just a couple of measures. Our State of the System report, which is on our project website, Wichita Transit Plan, WichitaNetworkPlan.com, includes a lot more information about these different cities and how they compare. Next slide, please. Right, earlier I mentioned that we conducted an onboard survey on buses, and this was done over 1 week in January of this year. We received over 1,200 responses, so we're very pleased with that result. And we learned a lot about Wichita Transit riders, particularly the different demographics, travel patterns, how they've been using the service, what's their satisfaction level for different aspects of service, as well as things that they would like to see improved. We also asked about their different, if they their work status or student status, and if they are employed, if they work on weekends or at nights. And we found that a high percentage of riders do work at times when transit is not currently available, and that being 8, 9 p.m. as well as on Sundays. Next slide, please. This graphic just summarizes some of the very interesting stats that we found as far as rider travel patterns. So I'll give you all a minute to just read through some of these. I will note overall riders are very happy with the service that's being provided by the operators, as well as the cleanliness of the vehicles, the transit center, the security. Some of the biggest requests that we heard were regarding level of service. So things like more frequency, later, and more weekend service. In addition to, next slide, please. In addition to hearing from riders, and not just through the onboard survey, but also just one-on-one at the transit center over several days, we also engaged various stakeholders throughout the community. We invited over 70 different stakeholders to 2 different visioning work sessions that we held in February. These included members of educational institutions, social services, nonprofit organizations, medical institutions, major business groups as well. WAMPO staff was involved, city staff. And they participated in these workshops in which we gave them an overview of existing conditions. We also gave a quick Transit 101, how to design a transit network, And then we broke up into groups and started to design different transit systems based on the limited resources that are currently available. And we found some key priorities, including having some strong corridors that have a more frequent level of service than what's offered today, which is mostly either 40-minute or 60-minute service. Many of the stakeholders would believe that the system would benefit from having higher frequency corridors where warranted, as well as stronger connections to Wichita State University, which is a major ridership generator, but has potential to generate even more transit ridership, as well as access to many of the social services located throughout the city, mostly in the central downtown areas, and then grocery stores that are currently, and particularly in neighborhoods that don't have direct access to grocery stores today. We also included some growth scenarios. So we gave people more resources as they were designing their different bus routes and bus networks. And some of the key things that they then added to these conceptual systems included Sunday service, more frequent routes, and more coverage and expansion into some of the areas that Bill just talked about earlier. With all this information that we gathered, next slide, please. We then started to develop different network concepts. And this is coming from collaboration with staff, what we heard from the writers, what we heard from the stakeholders. And you can advance one more slide. This shows the current network across the city. Most of the routes operate at the same level of service, same hours, roughly same frequencies. All but 2 routes go downtown to the transit center to connect, which means that some people have to go out of direction to travel, but it also means that people have timed connections. The next map shows the initial service concepts. And the way that we developed this was using existing resources. So assuming the current level of service, current budget, current number of vehicles and hours, we made some optimization adjustments to improve things like access to grocery stores, put more frequency on the 2 best routes, routes 21 and 22, 30-minute service. And then also more frequency in some of the other neighborhoods throughout the city that also have higher transit need. We took this out to the community, to the transit center. We had a second online survey, and overall the feedback was very positive regarding these cost neutral changes that resulted in some frequency improvements and also more direct service. Next slide, please. So here's a list of some of the community outreach that we conducted when taking out these different service concepts. Again, pop-ups, both at the transit center downtown, the university. We also attended some different public meetings. And next, we want to talk about the future expansion options. So while those initial service concepts look at improving service in the short term, we also want to identify how the system can grow into the future. Next slide, please. So currently, we're refining this list for 3 different scenarios, and each one of those scenarios is comprised of these different service investments. And the investments on the top, shown in blue, these are the higher priority investments. These are things that we've heard directly from the community that is needed in the near term. So more frequency, later, earlier service, Sunday service, and then going out to some of the destinations that currently don't have direct access. And then on the bottom half of the screen, we show different service investments that would be more midterm or long-term in nature. These require even additional resources, in some cases, more vehicles. But these are also things that would lead to a more complete transit network. So currently we're in the process of refining not only this list and the cost estimates that go along with it, but also packaging them into different scenarios that we'll be taking out to the community in the upcoming months. So that's where we're at right now with the network plan. I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for James, right? Yes. Any question for James? I'm not seeing any. Wait, we do have one. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick comment. Not a question, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew on behalf of the city. So we have a new transit director. Penny Feist had been the interim director since Mike Tan retired late last year. She had the interim tag removed, and today is her first official day. as Wichita Transit Director. She's on vacation this week, but she'll hit the ground running next week. So I just want to let everybody know.
All right, great, appreciate it. All right, any other comments? I'm not seeing any. Appreciate it, James.
Thank you.
All right. Is that it for that? No? Oh, sure, go ahead.
The WAMPO staff would like to thank TAC members because your quorum is so helpful and discussing significant activities for the region and also in helping approve funding commitments from Federal Highway Administration. So we are thankful and appreciative of your presence and quorum as well. And of course, without TPP, none of this will happen. And your recommendations and TPP approvals are critical. And WAMPO staff want to acknowledge and appreciate your presence. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chad. And no other business today. So the next item is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. All right, see you next time. Enjoy the day out there today.